right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, the time is 5:03 p.m. I'm calling to order a work session of the City Council of the City of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, May 7th, 2024. And Council, just as a reminder, the purpose of the work session is to have a discussion in preparation for starting the budget process, which really begins with staff reviewing all the needed budget for each of the departments. We're going to begin with a presentation that will outline the work that staff and I have done and putting together for an initial presentation. Out of this, what I'm hoping to get is feedback and direction so we can refine this before we take it to Budget and Finance on May 16th for our joint session. So just as a reminder, we do have a joint session scheduled on May 16th, which Budget and Finance, that we're going to be taking the next iteration of this presentation and providing, getting an opportunity for their feedback as well as giving council and mayor guidance. So we'll begin with the agenda, but this is intended to be a discussion, so feel free to raise your hand and jump in. But we will start with Matt giving the budget presentation after public comments. With that, we're going to go to public comments, and if you have comments, please step forward to the microphone and speak.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese, and I flip my comments because I usually say what I think about this in the next comment session. So this is what I would normally say at City Council, which is I really appreciate the great work that probably PD or Public Works did to clear out the non-Sunset Valley items that were in the Greenbelt in there. So I don't know if it was Public Works or a combination of Public Works and PD, but yay, we have our park back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. No other public comments? Let's go ahead and move forward with agenda item number 3, which is discuss the introductory fiscal year 25 budget presentation. I'll hand it over to the city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we have started yet another budget season. Welcome. I feel like we just did this, so deja vu, right? I know. Where did the first 4 months of the year go? I don't know. But yes, the departments have put their draft budgets together. Just please keep in mind this is a draft overview of the operational budget. I'm sure some of the individual line items will change, and we'll discuss some of the changes we know that are coming. But overall, we pretty much have a handle on the departmental budgets, including public safety, administration, and public works. So thank you to the department heads, Chief Carolyn and Kyle, and the mayor, who also met with us last week and helped us with this presentation. So here we go. So these are the projected ending fund balances for FY24, so what we are projecting to end the year with. Now this doesn't take into account perhaps some larger CIP expenses that may occur, which would just bring down the CIP fund, or any additional budget adjustments that may occur. But again, this is our best projection of where we will end the fiscal year at, which is about $28 million across all funds. So we just wanted to go into detail for the general fund. So I'm going to go back to this slide. Just keep in mind this non-committed, this $3.6 million that we're estimating to end the year with. This is non-committed general funds, meaning it's essentially just a savings account. This is what we could utilize to for projects, or we could just keep it in the bank as savings. The general fund reserve, what is the actual policy-based operating reserve, is $5.9 million. That is at a 12-month operating reserve. I know at one point the city did have an 18-month operating reserve. That is something that we could consider going back to, which would make that number larger. Another item is developing a reserve fund policy. That was a recommendation, and the third time the Long Range Planning Committee recommended that the city should work on developing a reserve fund policy, which would help the city council and staff know when to touch that reserve fund, what is appropriate. All right, committed general fund, we've got $1 million ending the year with. We've got $900,000 in the water conservation rebate program expansion. Of course, that used to be $1 million, but we moved $100,000 into the operating budget of this current fiscal year. And then we've got $100,000 for the City Beautification and Parks and Open Space Fund. So that could be utilized for FY25 for the, say, the upland schematic design or another parks and open space related project or beautification project. And then we've got about $55,000 of restricted general funds, health reimbursement funds, a donation that we received that is for a specific location in the city, the Burger Center Loop, and or the 4715 Pocket Park, and then some opioid funds. Those are for, federal funds. So any questions on this before I move on? Yeah, go ahead.
Opioid
Yeah,
funds.
those are not funds to purchase opiates. Opiates. They are funds from the federal government to deal with the opioid crisis. So there's certain items that you could buy. So when we were moving some of the other restricted and committed funds into the budget this year, that's just one we didn't touch. But perhaps Chief Carter could research, and maybe there's some supplies, Narcan or other supplies that we could have. That we could utilize those funds for. But yeah, those are funds received from the feds, and they have a very specific purpose. So.
PGA donation for Burger Center.
Yes.
Is there any way we could reallocate it for a different area if council so decided? I know
I would have to
got
look
the
into.
donations, and
I would
remember
yeah,
that.
I would have to look into that. I'd have to go back and look at the documentation that surrounded that donation. But I know that was when the PGA was partnering with the city, and they were utilizing Burger Center, right, for their shuttle service. So I feel like the donation to the city was to beautify that area. But I could do some research on that.
And then the third question, city beautification, parks and open space. Where did
Yes.
that come from?
So that, remember when, two budget cycles ago, when we were, I believe, finalizing the Parks and Open Space Plan, we created a surplus revenue fund.
Is that out of the 700,000?
Exactly. So this, we actually drew down that 700,000. We drew down the past 2 fiscal years to fund projects. But at the same time we drew down, I believe the balance was like 400,000 that we put into Upper Cougar Creek for this fiscal year. We put in 100,000 from last year's surplus. Does that make sense? So that's why we have a balance of 100,000. So 400,000 that remained moved into the budget to fund Upper Cougar Creek, and then we put $100,000 from the surplus from FY23
Into,
yes,
because I think the mayor made that
yes,
mention.
And really the purpose, I think, I recommended this maybe 3 years ago, was that we start saving up money for beautification and parks investment, knowing that we were going to, want to do that over the next several years, but we had to save up money first. With the adoption of the Parks and Open Space Plan, that is going to really become a vehicle for doing a project-based approach, which I think the purpose of this was to kickstart that process. It's not really needed anymore, right? I think we need to review each project on a project-by-project basis and fund the beautification, the parks, the art, directly rather than setting aside money every year anymore. I think it's outlived its need. I think the original need was really to build up that reserve, but now that we have an active parks, implementation plan, we're starting with Upper Creek, we're doing potentially the backyard here. Each of those need to be assessed on their own, and I don't think we need to have this committed fund anymore. So what I'd recommend actually is taking this $100,000 and using it for next year's projects. That's my recommendation. I don't think we need to put more money into a committed state every year anymore. It's created. The purpose is achieved from that. So, but again, we have that money. It's up to council whether they want to continue to add to it, so save up for larger projects in the future, or if we just want to fund those on a project-by-project basis.
All right. This slide just shows fund balances over time, going back all the way to FY19.
Oh, I just
Oh,
had
I'm
a
sorry.
question on that slide before this. Where's the 114 that we set aside from the surplus for this year for the art for Upper Cougar Creek? Where does that live?
That's in the CIP fund,
Is it,
correct? Right, Carolyn?
okay,
I think it's in, we'll need to check on that.
since that project's about to get underway, I think. I want to make sure we know where that is.
Yeah,
So
if it was tied to a specific project, it should have gone to the,
it was
it
restricted.
should have gone to the CIP fund, but if it didn't, then the general fund balance, well, the non-committed will go down, and then that will,
Okay.
there will be 100,
Yeah.
but we'll check on
It was
that.
restricted to Upper Cougar Creek.
Yes, for art. We'll check on that, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so fund balances, historical, it goes back all the way to FY19. So right when the city was, finished with the city facilities project, and then we went into the COVID-19 pandemic where we really didn't do projects for a couple of years. So this just shows you the balances of the different funds and the totals going back 5 years. So sales tax revenue, we report this every month, but just this, you can see a nice snapshot of our sales tax revenues. Again, going back, you can see the dip it took during the pandemic, our rebound, and again, we budgeted conservatively, less than what we actually received in FY23. This is what we've received so far this year. And then our proposed sales tax revenue for FY25. Staff is recommending, Budget and Finance has not weighed in yet, although I'm fairly certain they'll agree. They tend to agree with the conservative projections. We're including a 1% decrease in budgeted sales tax revenue for FY25.
Matt, I just noticed,
Yeah.
I think on the last column where we have the green and the crime control, it looks like we're just reusing the same numbers from our budget from 23-24. If we're doing a 1% decrease, I think those need to be
yes.
carried forward as well.
So that was
Yeah, it doesn't affect the general fund budget,
Right.
but it's,
so Kyle, will you make that note that we need to decrease the revenue on crime control and venue by 1%? Oh, it is
Okay,
in
just
budget.
the slide
I
just didn't have it. Okay.
I didn't do it on the slides. Great,
Okay,
awesome,
thanks.
thank you. What was I gonna say? Oh, overall though, general fund revenue is actually higher in the budget than FY24, and that is due to all interest revenue. We did increase interest revenue. We are receiving a very, very healthy chunk of change as far as interest is concerned. Also, now that we've reduced the number of tax pool accounts we have, all of that interest is really just going to the general fund. So, again, this is just a sales tax revenue detail. We're above budget 2%, but we're down about 4% from where we were, last year. So this is a overview across all funds. Revenue 10.5 million, and expenses 8.5 million. That only this revenue only includes one transfer, and that transfer is from the hot fund to the general fund for the same amount as Art Fest for FY24. Now, that amount could change depending on what the Arts Commission requests, but just keep in mind that this does not include any utility fund transfers, which will make revenue go up, or any encumbrance or carryover from unspent capital funds. And then the expenses, it does not include new CIP project expenses or anticipated increased costs. And there's some other caveats too that we'll address in the next slide. But the surplus is 1.96 million, although we know a lot of that is going to be spent on other items. So what will it be spent on? So we've got the utility fund operational subsidy. This year we're looking at about a 700,000 operational subsidy. The utility fund infrastructure transfer, I hope we can all agree that we want to at least make that, or we want to make that the $500,000. So that's 1.2 million right there. CIP proposed project transfers, repair and replacement transfers. I'll need a review if Public Works may have a vehicle to replace, PD may have a repair and replacement, and I'll need to get with Univista to see if we have any IT repair and replacement. We also have the salary adjustment pool. So we'll be presenting some salary survey data for council to consider. So there may be some adjustments based on the survey data. Then there also may be COLA and or merit increases. So that would be a pool that will be built into the budget. And then we did budget, in this draft budget is just the same amount as current payroll and current medical benefits for employees. We know that the current Humana policy that the city has expires at the end of this fiscal year. So it's going to increase by at least 10%. It could be higher depending on the plan that the city chooses. Yes, Councilmember.
Since it's a work session. can
Yeah,
we just-
yeah, go ahead.
What about building insurance? Because I know for us, it like doubled.
So, Kyle, have we already?
Okay.
Yeah,
You wanna-
so
you
we'll
wanna
be,
check?
that's another, you know, I think we get those numbers. No, it's not. The liability, yeah. So this just gives you details for each fund, what the revenue and what the expense and what the surplus is. Just to note, we did assume a 3% increase for fire and EMS services. That contract is currently under negotiation with Austin Fire. We actually meet with them next week to dig into the finances. So what they will do is they'll have a number, that'll be the baseline, and then if it mirrors the last round, it'll go up 3% every year. So we'll know more as we continue with that contract negotiation. You can see the $730,000 deficit in utility fund, that is the operational. So that's what the subsidy would need to be to balance out that fund. The street has a great surplus. The HOP fund, there's a placeholder for external grants for SFC, Daisy Dash, and it also has the transfer to the general fund for Art Fest. Same as, the placeholder is the same as FY24. We'll be discussing this later, but we are proposing the reason why the drainage fund, Fund 21, is zeroed out. Oh, sorry. The reason why the repair and replacement Fund 21 is zeroed out is because we're proposing merging that with the CIP to create a capital improvement and replacement fund. And then 25 is zeroed out because we are proposing moving that to a department within the utility fund. And I can discuss that in detail in a moment. Or Councilmember, question? Mm-hmm. Well, these don't take into account fund balances, so the crime control has a fund balance, so we don't have to, we actually want to draw, like, does that make sense? Like the crime control has like a $260-something thousand balance, so we don't have to balance that one out. Does that make sense? Yeah. We do have to for the utility fund. Yes, correct. Correct, yes. No. Again, this just shows the different departments within the general fund and what their expenses are. Again, keep in mind general government includes that $880,000. The largest portion of that is the fire and EMS services. Utility fund. So this details each department of the utility fund, and you can see that drainage is added. And in our discussion of utility rates, we haven't really discussed drainage. I think let's not maybe tackle that this year, but that is something also we need to consider in the future. Because as you can see, this year it is also operating at a deficit as well. So all of the departments in our utility in our enterprise funds are operating at a deficit.
Yeah, just real quickly on this
Yes.
slide, what I want to point out is that those revenue numbers
Oh yes.
include or assume, again, this is a draft budget, the first year of base rate changes in that 10-year rate increase. So these numbers already include the first year. We still have a deficit, right? And of course, we knew that. If we don't want to do that plan, then the revenue will go down, right? By, I think it's like $25,000 this year is all we're
Yeah, it
eating
only-
away, right? It says first year is very, very incremental. What it doesn't include is a kind of key thing, and I think we discussed this in an earlier slide. That's just the base rate changes, though, right? So it doesn't include the volumetric changes because that's something we haven't finalized and we didn't include in this draft one. we could include it by the time I think we meet with Budget and Finance if we want to look at the projected revenue based on averages for the average household. That would include the volumetric expected changes. So this is just the base rate increases for those services, the water, wastewater, and solid waste. Yeah,
So, yeah, adding the volumetric could decrease the amount of the deficit, but again, that's pending adoption of the new rate structure and the 10-year plan. So here's just a snapshot of the other funds. Just, I think we're going to discuss it later, but just the street fund, so it shows a very hefty surplus right now. However, there's potentially Reimagine Brody Phase 1A, and then there's also a mill and overlay of Brody proposed, which that would be estimated to be $1 million. I think we discussed that on a later slide. So other items in the budget. Jones Road Sidewalk, South Side, and Phase 2 Public Works Facility upgrade projects. Those are the only projects really built into this draft budget. Mentioned this assumes a 3% increase for fire and EMS services. The mayor just discussed this, the water and wastewater base rates and solid waste from the 10-year plan as discussed. The proposed volumetric increases not yet included. We've got placeholder for all the committee-related programs and expenses, so as the committees submit their budget, we'll have finalized numbers. That mostly affects just the general government department within the general fund, but I think P&E maybe had some requests that affects like maybe the venue, the green fund. And then Arts Commission will affect the hot fund. And then we also have placeholders for SFC, Daisy Dash, and the PTA and the elementary grant. So proposed changes to budget format, I already addressed these, but the Long Range Financial Planning Ad Hoc Committee, one of their recommendations this year was to reduce the number of funds, kind of simplify our budget. So the proposal is to merge the drainage utility as a department within the utility fund, and then to merge the repair and replacement fund with the CIP fund, and doing the research of for the salary survey. I've been looking at a lot of different cities' budgets. Many cities do have a capital improvement fund. So that is, I'm learning that is pretty common. However, a couple cities, they had a capital improvement and replacement fund, where essentially you're setting funds aside to fund projects and to replace equipment or to make repairs, like large, for capital expenditures. So, and then these would be the projected ending fund balances. Again, remember, this does not include all of the things we've discussed and projects. So yeah, $30 million balance, but we know that will go down as we have to fund the utility fund transfers and fund projects. So again, these are the two CIP projects that are in the budget. They're actually in the Public Works Department. We may move those over to the CIP fund. We'll have some internal discussions about that, but we've got the Public Works facilities upgrades, Phase 2. Phase 1 is, pretty much complete. The storage yard was separate, but Phase 1 was getting the.
No, that one's still, that'll be the summer.
Oh, this summer, okay. So there's more work to be done on that, but Phase 2 would be basically extending the storage area, so we have additional storage, kind of closing off, or is that part of Phase 1, closing off the?
Yeah, Phase 2 would extend the covered storage area by the garage, as well as new covered storage for the vehicles and equipment that Public Works has.
Yes. And then Jones Road Southwide Sidewalk Extension Construction. There's actually money in the budget this year that may be a project we're able to complete this summer, possibly. If we do it this summer, though, we will need a budget amendment because there's going to need to be a fence, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yes. So, but it could be that we have to wait till next year. So there's a $50,000 placeholder in the FY25 budget. So these are CIP projects proposed that are not yet budgeted. So there's Reimagine Brody, Phase 1A, schematic design. This will return to council as a discussion item. June 4th, yes, council member. Your mic. Your mic, council member. Yes.
The covered area.
Yep.
I remember remember talking to Katie about that, because I thought it was unusual that we did not extend the covered area all the way on the parking lot over here for Public Works. And she kept coming back with an explanation. I forget what it was. It was like something was in the way that we couldn't put another post or something to extend the cover.
I'm not sure what that was, but I can look into see if there's anything. I mean, I know the jellyfish is over there, but I don't think it should interfere. I think we should still be able to do that.
Because I asked her like 2-3 times, and she kept coming back, can't do it because of this,
Yeah,
can't, and I
I'd
forget
have to,
what it
I'd have to
was.
look into that. I'm not sure of anything that would
Okay, thank you.
change that.
Could be we were just trying to cut costs as much as possible. So, and that was going to drive up the cost. I don't know. Yeah.
When you're at 7.4 million,
Yeah.
Another 100,000 while they're doing the cover already is a lot less expensive
Right.
than to
right.
do it later.
Yeah. So, Reimagine Brody, all the committees will have had a chance to share feedback. We'll be presenting to council that feedback on June 4th and have further discussion to see, what pieces or what council is willing to possibly fund for schematic design of Phase 1A for FY25. So then we've got the Uplands Park schematic design. I believe P&E estimated $65,000 at their last meeting. That zoning change was initiated by council. It will be going to zoning commission this summer. City Hall backyard construction, we're getting a presentation tonight. It's estimated at $537K. That's multiple funds funding that, but that's primarily general fund. The Brody Lane Mill and Overlay, estimated at $1 million. That would be the street fund, from the street fund. 6107 Brody Trailhead construction, that's estimated $600,000. That's pretty much general fund. Hazardous materials, traps, lid cleaning and replacement. That is again for Brody Lane. That estimated at $250,000, and that would be from the venue fund. And then also there's the Stearns Lane water line. This would only be Phase 1A. This is, we are contractually obligated by the City of Austin to get water to Stearns Lane, and so this would be Phase 1, which would at least get water to our lift station. So that's something we may be considering as an FY25 project, is just Phase 1 of that project. And there was also a cost participation agreement with 4800 US Highway 290, the Town Bridge property. That property is up for sale. I've been in contact with the owner about options, so I don't really know what is happening with that. I think there's a couple options on the table, but however, one would require a zoning change, which would mean they couldn't operate, they couldn't go forward with the development that was approved by council, the watershed development permit that was approved by council, right? But maybe the other one will, so.
On the Stearns Lane water line, didn't we last, when you guys met with the City of Austin, didn't you come to agreement, why put in new lines when you have existing lines? We would just take over?
No, they do not have existing lines on Stern Lanes that we can take over. So the discussions we had with the City of Austin was to provide services to those residents who are in Sunset Valley, but not to extend the line all the way through the ETJ to basically try to amend our, what's called the CCN, so that those would no longer be part of our service area. They would be an Austin service area. But the Sunset Valley residential portion would remain Sunset Valley's responsibility to make a water line over there. And there's not a separate water line that we could take over that doesn't also feed the rest of Barton View.
Sure, makes sense.
Yeah,
And
and I
we
think,
have to, and we have to have it done by when, 2025? Because I thought,
It was supposed to be 2023, I believe.
that's what I remember.
So, yes.
Okay.
yeah, we haven't been, it hasn't been an issue yet, but it could be flagged. The other thing about the Stearns, and so City Administrator mentioned this, but we were going to share some of the costs for this water line with the Town Bridge development. It looks like that's not going forward, and so now that's why it's kind of in italics until we find out more. We need to move forward with it. We were hoping we could do it with a cost share agreement. That may or may not be on the table anymore, and so the full cost of the project may have to come back to council. Council may want to pursue, some alternative way of funding it, like we did with the the Brody Lane water line, if we want to have an assessment, for property that's there, that's something we could consider too, but I think we're going to find out the details and determine, what the cost looks like and bring that back to council.
We might be okay to just keep on kicking this down the road until that property is sold, because as long as Austin doesn't say we have to have it done by a certain time, and you're gonna be fined if you don't, that gives you that leeway.
Yeah, it's possible, and this also needs to be looked at with all the other projects we have going on next year in terms of capacity for staff to manage as well. So, the other thing I'm just going to point out real quickly is that the term schematic design, that's the plan, right? So what I'm trying to indicate here is that if we move forward with these projects, the schematic design is going to get us to a plan, and the construction would be the year after that, or the next fiscal year. That's kind of the rhythm that we've been on, and so construction, like the City Hall backyard, that's something we can fund and begin, and a lot of that hopefully will be done in-house, as we're going to see the presentation for. The schematic design just gets us that next step, so that the engineering plan is ready for submissions or reviews or creating bids for. So, just as another kind of point to make.
And then, of course, there's, council can put any other, priority projects, programs, funding. Now is a great time to let the mayor and I know, so that we can consider that and add that to the budget, what we present to Budget and Finance, and what we consider for filing for the mayor's budget. So, any questions, comments? Do we need to go back and review any of the slides? I know I kind of raced through that presentation. So.
Yeah, can you go back one slide? Because
Sure.
I just kind of, so when we're talking about that 1.9 million of excess revenue, right? The things that are going to eat away at that are projects here that touch the general fund, right? The transfer for operational subsidy, so that's another big chunk of that money. And then one thing that you've seen over the last year is that when construction projects come in, we don't want to put a specific number that is revealing, what our target is for that to contractors. So we typically put a generalized estimate, and then when the bids come back, we either have to make a budget adjustment to increase it, or we get lucky and it's less than that. So we've seen over this last year, though, that we've had to make several budget adjustments for construction projects once the bids come in, and that's something we just have to anticipate too. In terms of, do we budget for it, or do we know that we're going to have some budget adjustments throughout the year that we have to account for. So holding back some of that funding may be wise. Certainly the projects, this list is something that we want to scrutinize and say, what is it that we want to prioritize? We do have a healthy set of funds, of course, and we do have that healthy non-committed amount right now. If we did nothing, if we didn't fund the transfer, if we didn't do these projects, that non-committed fund would go up by another $2 million, right? But that's, I don't think that's the direction that we want to go with the things that, are we going to be a benefit to the residents? So it is, but what I really want to hear is, feedback to say, out of the things that we've budgeted for, that we talked about, is there something that we want to pull, right? Something that we want to say, it's not there, and kind of get consensus on it. Or feedback on projects to say, we want to move forward with these, so let's include them in a budget for the next iteration. We may be able to even do that for the May 16th presentation. If we say there's general consensus on moving forward with Brody Mill, Lane Mill and overlay, we can just, kind of put that into the budget as far as a transfer from the street fund to the CIP, or, however we want to do it. So, but with that, opening up for everybody's feedback, and Karen, you want to start?
I think,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Karen, then I'll go.
so I'm really committed to seeing the Uplands Park schematic design included, because we've kicked that bucket down the road for 18 years. So I'd really like to see us get the plan for that, so that we could move forward with that. And then also on the Hot Fund transfer for Art Fest, if we could do a 3% increase on that, because a lot of our tents are falling apart. And I know we're going to have some increases in the infrastructure for that.
One thing I'd like to suggest is that I know that we expect sales tax revenues to go up with the new stores opening and everything else, but I think we should still be more conservative in our budgeting for sales tax revenue. Typically, we've come up with a number we think that we're going to reach, and then reduced it anywhere from 2 to 5%. I don't think 1% is enough. I think you should think about maybe 2 or 3%. It's better to be conservative. And last year we said we're going to reduce it by 5% over our projection, and that turns out to be what we got in revenues, because there are various factors that will make revenues go up and down. I think we're always better off being a little more conservative. Secondly, I know lots of other cities do this, but I have to question the value of having a separate CIP fund. I'm not sure what that really does for us, because we're going to go and allocate out money for CIP projects every year. So why have a bucket where we stuck in all this money that we may or may not actually use in the future? I'm not sure I see the value of having a CIP fund. The third thing is, and I know Matt and other people have heard this story before, and I'm sorry to repeat it again, but it does make a point. Some years ago, I worked for a company that IBM bought. And that company went from, when IBM bought them, they went from $50 million in revenue a year to $1.8 billion in 4 years, which is a fantastic success. And they had visions of being, we're going to be one of the biggest software companies in the world. And what happened was, they went a little crazy. They tried to do everything and failed at everything. And their decline was as spectacular as their rise. And I learned two really important things from that. One, no matter how much money you have, no matter how many resources you have, you're always going to want to do more than you're capable of doing. And two, if you try to do too many things, you're going to probably fail at all of them. And I'm a little worried, looking at that list up there, that we're starting to get a little over our skis. I don't think we could do all that in 1 year, and I don't think we should try. I think we should prioritize that list carefully and say, here's what we know we can do. The other thing I learned from that experience was that physical discipline is just as important when you have lots of money as when you are barely getting by. There's a tendency when you've got a lot of money that you want to spend. And just to be clear, I think we should be investing in the city and investing in the city's future. There's no question of that. But I think we need to be realistic. What can we really execute? The third thing I learned from that experience is that great success makes some people go crazy, but that's another story for another time.
Rudy?
Councilmember Young, you do have me confused.
Oh.
Yes. The last council meeting, or the two prior, you mentioned that we were saying the sky is falling, be conservative on the budget. And now you're saying be conservative on the budget, which I like. Mm-hmm. I don't like the other conversation of the sky is falling. We were never saying if the sky was falling. In fact, you were on Budget and Finance when you recommended the 5% decrease
I was.
on projections, which I liked. Mm-hmm. And so I like that conversation of being conservative, of watching the funds.
Just to be clear, when I said the sky was falling, I was referring to several years ago when people were saying, "Oh,
Don't spend.
online is gonna kill us."
Okay.
Right, and then we're gonna have a 90% decrease during COVID. When I said that people were saying the sky was falling, those are the things I was referring to, not anything that's happened in the past couple of years.
Thanks
Just to
for
be
that
clear.
correction. So on that, with the capital improvement projects, we know we can do the Brody Lane Mill and Overlay because we've got plenty of money in the street fund. I would like the dollar amount to be lower, but hey, wishing ain't gonna make it happen. We know we can do 6107 Brody Lane because we already approved that. So we know that's done. Hazmat, we know we can do. City Hall backyard construction, we might be able to, we're doing a lot of it in-house. We might be able to get some of that estimate a little lower. The top two, Reimagine Brody, totally has me concerned, totally. Like I said, we started out with just saying, we have a lighting issue on Brody, to major reimagine Brody. So that one's got me concerned. I would recommend, it's other than this page, I would recommend we go back to 18-month reserve. I would also recommend that we do $1,000 into the infrastructure utility fund. 1,000, forgive me. I thought I was saying $1 million. What came out is 1,000, okay? $1 million for infrastructure in the utility fund. And I think that's it, thanks. Oh, and kick Stearns Lane down the road.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I like the 18 months, and I do remember us being there at one point, and I don't know what happened to that, but
We reduced
City
it for
facilities.
to fund the city facilities project.
that was like before I was even on council, so I must have. I guess I see a lot of numbers go by here, but let me get back over to it. That trailhead is at $600,000 at 6107 Brody?
That's just a rough estimate. We need to, it's still in the planning phases, so those are just numbers we kind of thought based on some of the other construction we have going on. But we will see how, when we get further along with the plans, and make sure that we get a construction estimate from the engineers.
Is it still just like a circle drive with a few parking spots?
Circle Drive with a few parking places, but there's a lot of grading issues there that we're having to address. So there are some things that we're going to have to address with that. But I'm also going to be looking at the possibility of getting a grant for that, some of that project as well.
Oh, cool.
From the Texas Parks and Wildlife, they have some grant opportunities that, with trails, that we may be looking at.
Great. Yeah, we're adding like a 3% to all these services, and then we're estimating like a 3% reduction, and I don't like those two numbers. Like, I know eventually we'll rebound, but yeah, I think in the past we've also had lists like this of things that we wanted to do, and it was just ambition. And the truth is, like, actually, you guys were killing it the past couple of years, so maybe we just coast a little bit and enjoy some of the infrastructure we've done. And I am excited to see the schematics of Upland Parks, of the Uplands Park. I had some ideas about that I was talking to someone about. There's like a style of pavilion that is I've only ever seen in Texas, and my wife, who is from Texas, she's from Austin, she says it's ugly, and I think it's like a very unique kind of, it's, Alamo Pocket Park in East Austin, or I mean, it is like the pavilion that you see at kind of like 4-H's across Texas, but there's something like so quaint and like 1970s Texas about them, but I'm just hoping we're not gonna over design that and try to make it too cool. But
Mayor Pro Tem?
Just to expand on my last remarks, and I forgot to say something I wanted to say, which is I am in favor of putting out the plan for the Uplands. Like you said, we've talked about it for a long time. We put it on our list of the next things to do. I question the cost for that, and I'd like to look into that a lot more. I think we spend too much money on vendors, and I think that's an area we should consider for cost containment, but I do think it should be done. And I want to be clear, I think all of these are worth doing and we should do. I just don't think we can do all of them in the next fiscal year. And I think what we should concentrate on is, going with what we'd already planned. Reimagine Brody, which I think needs to be cut down to a reasonable project as opposed to the initial proposal we had, which I thought was excessive. But I think it's good. I think it's the thing that has the most ROI for the city in the long run. So I think those first two are the ones we should emphasize. Is hazmat traps something we need to do in the next year, or is it something that we want to do?
So technically, I mean, we usually try to clean them every year, and it is time for them to be cleaned. The last time they were cleaned was 2019, I believe. So it is time for them to be cleaned again.
Then that should probably be like at least in my mind, third on the list. City Hall backyard, I want to see us do. Brody Mill Lane, the Brody Lane Mill and Overlay, I question if that really needs to be done this year. I question if we could do the Brody Trailhead, and also that cost seems really high to me, and I'd like to see a breakdown of that as well.
Matt, can you go back to, I'm trying to, like, the overall kind of expenses, one of those slides for all the funds? Okay.
That's probably the best.
So
snapshot,
the utility
yeah.
one, what does that doesn't include the operational transfer, does it include an infrastructure transfer?
No, there's no transfer. So,
Okay,
that doesn't include, the 300, the 291 that's been kind of standard. We did more this year because of that extra, that federal funding, but, I mean, from what I hear from council feedback, we want to at least do the
yeah, that's what I was
500,000.
gonna say, is that's another sort of, in addition to the operational subsidy, which, we've talked a lot about. I would agree that we need to get at least $500,000. I know Councilmember Rosengarten, you suggested $1 million. So that's, we know we need to invest $500,000 every year to stabilize the fund for the next 30 years. And so I think that's something we should move forward with, a version of that in the next iteration. Yeah.
And one way you could look at it too is it may not touch like the FY25 money coming in, going out. You could look at us taking some of that non-committed and just committing go ahead and committing $1 million of it specifically to the utility fund. So it's like, again, it's a savings account for infrastructure projects for the future, so.
Right. Councilor Johnson.
I also like what Chip said about just getting rid of the SIP fund and just putting it all into general fund. That was your idea? And then as we're doing projects, I think that started right before I got on council. Was that like 2019?
In talking with staff prefers having, I believe we prefer having correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but we like having the CIP fund for projects, especially because projects generally take multiple years. So,
Okay.
You put it into that CIP fund, and then it's for funding that project. So it's almost like it's a holding account for that. And again, the money's not moving around like it used to, right? We don't have an account. It's all it's all going on behind the scenes, right?
Okay.
It's just coding. It's like, well, this money is now coded for capital improvement projects and capital replacement projects. We did the same thing with the repair and replacement fund for years. So why not just have one that's for CIP and for repair and replacement?
And this is just a almost basic math question, but I've heard it alluded to multiple times. That's like, oh, when it's all in the same account, then it bears more interest. But that's not how interest works, or that's not how percentages work anyway. So what am I missing on that?
It is all in this. It is all in the same bank account. It is all in the tax pool prime account.
Yeah.
But our accounting system is actually keeping track of the fund balances. Does that make sense?
The-
So
we
it's
ha-
allocated.
We are earning slightly more interest because a couple of the accounts weren't tax pool prime, they were old tax pool accounts, and they earned less interest. I guess they have more risky investments or something.
Okay, that makes more sense to me. Thank you.
I think the other advantage by having one taxable account is that before, each fund would earn interest and it would have to stay in that fund, right? So if, we're earning interest on the street fund, the interest goes in the street fund. Now it can all go to the general fund and we have more maneuverability for that interest money, right? So that's the other benefit of combining them as well. So council, any other feedback before we get ready? Councilmember Brown?
Yeah, I have a comment. Yeah, I think relative to, I share your concerns, and I personally am fairly fiscally conservative myself. So I think for a 5%, 2 to 5%, we're talking what, $200,000 to $500,000. And I'm looking at the capital improvement projects, and there's concern, I guess, over whether this is biting off too much or not. But it seems that this should not be a mystery. We should be able to determine what is manageable in a year in terms of the work necessarily, either to have this work done or for the city staff to largely take care of themselves. So I would think that it would be helpful to me anyway if staff or Public Works, as appropriate, perhaps it may be better for staff to do this, to sit for a little bit and think about, okay, what's you know, what are the person hours required, or however you manage these, and you know, let's think ahead and plan. And if we run out of hours in the year, then that can be allotted to this, then I think we maybe cut back, and it can serve the dual purpose of pursuing a potential cut to the budget, as well as being something that's manageable for staff for next year in terms of these projects.
Thank you. Councilor Reisinger?
In previous budgets, we talked about, as council in the retreat, take 3 projects, work at those 3 projects and get them done. Because sometimes when we have an overload of projects, they don't get done anyway. So rather than putting them on the agenda, just
Yeah, and I agree in terms of I don't want staff to be overwhelmed. What we've done in the past, and I've seen this as a council member, is defer projects, right? You know, that becomes something like we put money aside, we don't get through it, and then we have to kind of roll it over every year. I think it's, from my perspective, I'd rather be right-sized, you know, with that. In addition to taking account staff, you know, commitment, I think we'd also be looking at what commitment we're going to need from, you know, vendors, you know, et cetera. Some of that can alleviate, obviously, staff hours too, but I agree with Councilmember Johnson. Staff has been doing a great job over the last couple of years in terms of getting projects completed underway. So do appreciate the fact that we've demonstrated a increased capacity, and so certainly a testament to our staff as well. So any other questions, Council? We're going to take a brief break before we start our official council meeting, and we'll have a chance for public comments to comment on the work session at that time. All right, so we're going to adjourn the work session at 5:55, and we'll return at 6 o'clock for the regular council meeting at 6 in 5 minutes. Counselor, are we ready? All right, the time is 6:05 p.m. I'm calling to order a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, May 7th, 2024. We're going to begin with public comments and then move into our agenda for the night. So if anybody wants to make public comments, please step up to the podium, make sure the microphone is live and activated, and then you can speak your 4 minutes.
Is that on? Green. Green? It's on, okay. So as a member of the Sunset Valley Arts Commission, I wanted to thank not only the council members, but all of the volunteers. We had more volunteers than ever this year. It was a great event. And I just wanted to thank everyone for making this the best 16th. This was our 16th Art Fest. It was the best one yet. And I especially want to call out our Public Works Department, who just knocked it out of the park with the Adventure Build expansion this year. It was absolutely wonderful. And thanks to all of you that participated. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Rose. On that note, for 16 years, Karen Medicus has spearheaded the Arts Fest. And she has done an incredible job. She used to do what we now pay people $50,000, $60,000 a year to do all herself. Thankfully, we pay other people to do that now. But there is just someone else who really needs to be appreciated, who's the person who was talking, and that's Karen Medicus. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Danny Horgan. I represent the world's first military discounted house of prayer. Tonight is in memory of Scott Sheldon, Mr. Scott Sheldon, a former Public Works employee, along with Ernest Robles. He would say that the church should be as it once was, Danny. It should be the focal point of a community. Therefore, my closest and trusted friends will be the board members, as I am devout and the president of Fort Horgan. You may remember the removal of Admin Clay Collins as assistant Sarah Wilson, Public Works Director Katie Phillips, the pro tem mayor Ketan Karud, and Scanlon Buckle and Young, the city attorneys. I pray that council place 4 individual items on these separate agenda issues. The 3 donkeys, the 3 elephants. Could you imagine being squeezed in between 2 of that? The owl that could represent Moloch, he eats his own and their bones. Place term limits on council. I've recently learned that it is a felony to disturb the habitat of migratory birds. And I left a message with Senior Officer Brownlow for the warden's contact information. As I retired, and I will confess in full that I felt the pressure of the neighborhood, and whoever wrote, I, Danny Horgan, give authority to Teresa Anderson to file for a demolition permit on my behalf. Excuse me if I tend to get loud. The last administration and I wrote the town's utility yard rules together. I have the right to make a living screams the color of any man. This Art Fest, 5 vehicles were parked illegally outside my gate, obstructing the ROE. We are in need of a red flashing light at Pillow and Jones as I was almost run over walking my dog. The corner where Master Sergeant Bob Horgan Trail used to be the city's main source of income and revenue commerce for our community. The emphasis remains the same while these discriminatory problems persist. Concerning public safety, let me take a break here. My donation to the Rotary Club through Judge Susan Steig's office brought a free library to the community. Take a moment, take a seat. Pay attention and watch the violations occur throughout your school district. To Scott Children and Ernest Robles, thanks for being a man's man who fixed the roads and allowed me the ability to progress. I also want to thank Joe at Sue Colby's. He's also a good man. A man's man will not ask you to open a broken door. He will tell you to step aside and get out of the way. So I'm going to hand you just a few notes that I found on the computer. They may interest you, they may not, but my church will be open for 1,000 years, and you'll never hear anything like this happening in my church. There you go, sir. Ma'am. Sirs. Y'all have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Any additional members of the public wish to speak at this time? All right, Council, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is staff reports. Before we get into staff reports, I also want to echo what was said during public comments that the support of staff for this year's Art Fest was extraordinary. I just really want to make sure that that's recognized. I think everybody really contributed to a wonderful event. It was great to actually see all the work that went in before the event that Public Works supported as well. And like you said, Karen, this has been something that or Melissa said this is something that you've shouldered for many, many years, and the growth and success is a testament to your leadership in this area, and certainly really appreciate that as the mayor and a citizen, a resident of the city. So I think also during this time we had our Spring Fling events. So that was also something that staff pulled together with the CED committee. So also wanted to recognize the work that went into that and the work of the CED committee as well. It was a very fun event. And again, appreciate that Docs was willing to set aside their time and their schedule for the residents to come together and celebrate. With that, we'll hand it over to the city administrator for the administration report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. Happy to report that the Tyler Technologies ERP software project is complete. The software is completely built out, both the financial portion and the HR portion. We are up and running, and that is what we are using to build the budget and the budget presentation that you all just heard. So very glad that that project is complete. We're still learning things about the software and the reports and everything, but just wanted to thank you all so much for initiating that project. It is making our lives much, much easier, so thank you. And GovBuilt permitting and licensing software, that is actually owned now by MCCI, but that project is underway. Jerry and I are working with them to get that off the ground. Engagement HQ and Gov Delivery. So this was a package of products that council authorized purchase from Granicus. Granicus also is the host of our website. So the EHQ, that's the nickname for it, project is nearly complete. We actually have a pre-launch meeting with them this week. So at the next meeting, we will, so the May 21st meeting, there will be no staff reports. The June 4th meeting, the site will be launched by then, so there will be a push to get residents to register. And we'll also have a presentation and a demo of EHQ, and you'll get to see what that looks like and the several projects, what that will look like on that site. The FY22 audit, this is our last audit with Haney & Company, the auditor we've used for many years. They have sent us a draft. Our staff review is underway. We are hoping that we can get that onto the budget and finance agenda for the 16th. Just as a reminder that there will be a joint meeting next Thursday. I'm still trying to determine where that's going to take place. If it's going to be in the City Hall conference room, it's too many of us to be over there, but we have at least one remote member, so I may just make the whole meeting remote. I don't know. I'm still noodling on that, but I'm hoping that you all wouldn't have to stay, but or maybe you could, but we'll do a review of the FY22 audit, review of the draft, and then we can bring that to council, and then we can pass that and then work on the FY23 audit can begin with our new auditors. And of course, the FY25 budget is underway. You all just heard the introductory presentation, and we also discussed that we are in negotiation for the Austin Fire Department for the Fire and Emergency Services interlocal agreement. Committees, The committees are meeting this month, mostly discussing Reimagine Brody and also ongoing projects. And then next month, the committees will start planning their budgets for FY25. I think P&E already discussed their budgets. Upcoming topics, so we've got, we need to update our building and fire codes. So that should be on the next agenda. There may be some code amendments coming based on P&E committee recommendations. Jerry wrote a development update, and the sales tax report is attached, as well as the retail occupancy report. We're very happy that a lot of businesses are opening, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions on the admin report.
And thanks to those council members that have been able to attend some of those grand opening events. I think we've had 3 in 1 month, which is a record as far as I know in terms of inviting us to attend those, and certainly making those connections with the business owners and the managers is really valuable for us, and appreciate also staff and the PD department that were at those events as well. Questions for the city administrator? All right, moving on to Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to highlight a few items on here. First of all, the storage yard will open on Monday, May 13th. So we will send out a notification to residents that it will reopen with a copy, with a link to the rules and everything like that to explain what will happen, but it should be open and operational and ready to go on Monday. We also are working on the little shortcut between the Sunset Valley Nature Area, getting us closer over to the South Hills Conservation Area. That was part of the Parks and Open Space Plan. That's underway right now. American Youth Works is on site working on some of that. And there's one other item I was going to talk about. The Upper Cougar Creek Sunset Valley Savannah Trail is paired with some improvements to Ernest Robles Way and a few things over on Home Depot Boulevard. We'll be coming back to council on the 21st with the watershed permit for the Savannah Trail. It's going to need council approval for that. And then that project will move to bids. We've, I think, got everything, most everything has come back from TCEQ. There are a few comments that they are working on clearing, and that should be ready to bid. And that project will be moving toward construction. The plan for that project is that anything that happens on the roadway would not be happening during the months of November and December, but Upper Cougar Creek itself, because it's removed from the street, may be happening during that time period. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody had any questions.
Councilmember Rosengard?
Not pertinent to what you just discussed, but previously we talked about having the dam, what
Yes.
we call the dam, painted for the pickleball, and that hasn't been done yet.
So we've kind of worked through that. If we're going to use it as a pickleball location, there's a place, we need to do a little bit of a level up on part of it, because there's a section of that area that holds water, and it becomes very slick when it does that. So we've gotten some quotes for the cost of that, and that is more than it's about $14,000, I think, to do the level up, which we only have $10,000 in the budget. So if that's something we still want to pursue, we can definitely come back to council with a little bit of a budget amendment to make that happen. But it's going to be up to you guys to determine that.
Mayor Protem?
Uh,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry.
Councilmember Rosengard.
I thought all we needed to do was power wash it, because it's got algae growing on the.
It's got algae
cement.
growing on, and it just keeps coming back every time, because that area holds water for a good period of time.
Well, play when the algae is cleaned up, don't play when it's out.
There you go.
Mayor Protem?
I just wanted to thank you and the staff of Public Works for making the storage yard happen as quickly as it did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson?
And who did the thing on the gate? That looks pretty good.
That's me with some assistance from Zach.
I love it.
Thank you.
And also, just for the storage yard, is that going to include the new containers that we have for disposal, or is that to become?
We are still waiting and trying to figure out something with TDS on the cardboard dumpster, but the other ones are there. The 20-yard dumpsters are there. And then we are making a little space for like a little tire house for people to put the tires in.
Okay.
Because they have to be separate, you can't send those to the landfill.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions for Public Works? All right, moving on to Public Safety.
Good evening. I'll start off with our staffing. As you know, we've had a hard time. We had 4 openings at the beginning of the fiscal year. That includes 2 new positions that council approved. I can finally say that we've hired 2 officers, so now we are looking to fill the 2 new positions. So we've had to kind of be a little more aggressive about recruiting than we've been in the past. We've been going out to academies in areas that pay lower than we pay. We've gone down to recruit their academy cadets, trying to catch them right before they graduate from the academy, and it's paid off for us. We hired our 2nd officer last week. He'll be graduating from the academy just south of San Antonio in June, so he'll be starting in June. We still have 2 more openings, but we're going to keep using that strategy, and we should hopefully by end of summer have all the positions filled. So that's good news. All agencies are having trouble filling vacancies, and it looks like we found kind of a little honey hole for us if nobody else discovers them and takes them from us. Last Friday, we held a police department business summit. We had 30 people confirm. About 10 businesses showed up with maybe an equal number of residents. Officer Brownlow did a really good presentation, kind of giving an overview of the police department. And then we heard concerns from the businesses and as well as residents. And the main concern that we're getting from residents is still some of the illegal camping. I do want to let residents know that the way we here in Sunset Valley prevent these large camps from starting to build up is that we're out there regularly and we deal with them. If one campsite comes up, we get it cleaned up, and we also work to relocate that person. We don't just go out there and kick people out, but usually we know who they are and we try to get them directed towards services. Some go, some don't. We have actually relocated one individual with their family. So, but I just want residents to know that we're always on top of that, and we're not going to get surprised by a large campsite within the city limits here in Sunset Valley.
Questions for Public Safety report? Right. Thanks, Chief. We'll move on then to the rest of our agenda items, starting with council consideration agenda items for approval on consent. Councilmember Rosengren.
I move to approve on consent agenda item number 5, minutes with corrections, number 6, and number 7.
All right, so the motion is to approve on consent item number 5 with corrections, number 6 and number 7. Does anybody want to pull one of those items from the list? Is there a second for that motion? All those in favor of approving on consent item number 5, 6, and 7, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, we approved on consent item number 5, approval of the minutes from the April 16, 2024 regular meeting with corrections. Item number 6, approval of a resolution designating May 2024 as Wildfire Awareness Month in the city of Sunset Valley. And item number 7, approval of a resolution authorizing the police department to apply for a $40,000 Motor Vehicle Crime Prevention Authority grant. And I appreciate the public safety and police department bringing that forward as a potential funding source for us. With that, we're going to move on to agenda item number 8, which is consider act on approval of amendments to the financial policies 203 interlocal agreements and 205 local purchasing programs as recommended by the Budget and Finance Committee. And Council, today I think you received an update since the backup material was incorrect or had the wrong documents with the correct documents with the red lines for the proposed changes. And we'll hand this over to City Administrator for introduction of this item and next steps.
Thank you. So these are continuing, the Budget and Finance Committee has been continuing to review financial policies for the city and make any recommendations. 203 deals with interlocal agreements, and 205 deals with local purchasing programs. Since these are both policies that have state guidelines, I asked the city attorney to review. The city attorney made some recommendations to make the policies fall in line with those statutes and guidelines from the state. And I think there was like either an outdated or the wrong commission was mentioned in FP 205, and some additional additional definitions of what governmental functions and services were on 203. So the budget and adding some additional language for what needs to happen with approval for interlocal agreements. So city attorney reviewed and made recommendations. The Budget and Finance Committee reviewed and made a motion to recommend to council to approve the amendments as presented. So apologies for the incorrect backup being included in the packet.
Councilor Rosengard?
Your mic.
I move to approve financial policies 205 and, what's the other one? 203, and the only reason I didn't put it on consent is I wanted to have that clarified. Thank you.
All right, there's a motion to approve the financial policies 203 and 205. Is there a second for that motion? Councilor Romanicus? Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, we approved the updates or amendments to the two financial policies and appreciate Budget and Finance and with their recommendation and review of it, as well as the city attorney for the fact-checking and diligence. Council, we're going to move on to agenda item number 9, which is a public hearing and possible approval of an ordinance amending section 150.066 of the Land Development Code relating to the Board of Adjustment. And Jerry, you going to take this one?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Jerry Restbevan, excuse me, Development Services Manager, City. If the council members may recall, last June, y'all passed a resolution asking the Board of Adjustment to take a look at the findings of fact that they use in determining a hardship to make sure that they are clear and explicit and consistent. The board did have a series of work sessions, 3 I believe, to come up with amendments to the findings. The board then unanimously voted to approve that recommendation. That recommendation was forwarded to the Zoning Commission, and last week the Zoning Commission also unanimously recommended approval of the amendment. The staff also supports the amendment. We do have board member Sandy Cox here, who's available just to answer questions if you have any, and I'm available for questions as well, and staff requests your approval of this item.
Rosengard.
One of the changes was that you cannot build something next door to someone which hinders the sunlight drastically. Where did this come from? Something that somebody does, did it happen to someone and that's why someone on Board of Adjustments wants to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else?
I cannot say where it came from because it was already there, but that is.
That was all in red.
Huh?
It was all in red. It was there?
It was its own finding, and then it became a subsection of finding number 2. So
Yeah,
it was,
so if you scroll down,
was-
like there's a big
it was
area.
it was its own finding.
Right.
Number 9. So there were 10 findings. Yeah.
Okay.
So we just became a
Didn't remember
subset
that
of
from
finding number
before,
2.
but when I saw that, that stuck out. I was like, what? Because when you're building, for instance, houses, and there's a vacant lot next to you, and you build a house, and it's a 2-story, it's definitely going to block someone's sunlight. And I'm like, wow, that's extreme. But like you said, it was already there. And I agree that the 10 findings a lot of times did not pertain to the applicant who was asking for the variance. And so I'm glad that they revisited this, and I sat in on a couple of the meetings, and it was not fun.
And Councilmember, if you recall too, we also went through other documents. The only thing we're asking for the council approval for is the code amendment, but there's other documents that the board uses, the procedures document, the interpretive rules document, that we further refined and took some pieces from the code, moved them over there, and vice versa. But I do think it's a lot clearer now. It will be easier for someone requesting a variance to go through and figure out exactly what they need to present to the board when they're doing their request.
Other questions from council, by the staff or the Board of Adjustments Committee? I really want to echo my appreciation of the work that was done. I know the BOA has been working on this for the last year almost, and even before that, there was, just a lot of discussion about moving forward with some revisions. And also just to really appreciate, Jerry, your work and guidance with that process, since your experience has been able to, I think, facilitate that, make it a lot easier, and certainly for council to consider these changes. So, all right. Any public comments that we have? Anybody who wants to speak at this time? Great. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Motion to approve an ordinance amending section 150.066 of the Land Development Code relating to the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, there's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion, council? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, the motion passes, and I appreciate, again, the work that went into this, and hopefully it makes it easier for applicants and staff to, and the board to navigate these requests. All right, so council, we're going to be moving on to presentation and discussion and possible action on the City Hall backyard project presented by Men Collaborative. And I think we're going to hand this over to Matt to cue up the presentation, and then Men is going to walk us through. I appreciate you coming back for another project.
It's me again. Hello. All right, would you mind doing full screen, Matt? Okay. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for having me here to present tonight. And I will be talking about our schematic design for City Hall backyard, with your approval, we'll be able to move into our construction documentation phase of this plan. So my name is Carrie Spiegelhalter, and I'm a landscape architect and co-founder at Mend Collaborative. And just as a little bit of an overview for this project, the intention is to kind of activate the space behind City Hall, kind of do a little bit of work in the community garden to replace the fence and to make it ADA accessible, and to have the gathering space that's going to be designed here also connect to the greater trail system that goes throughout Sunset Valley. And so we're on month 5 of this project. We kicked off in January of this year. We're hoping to move into the design development construction document phase and have this constructed and finished in spring of next year. So here's the overall site plan. I'm just going to touch on some of the major features that we're looking at here, and then we'll kind of dive in on each of them. So as you enter, we have a welcome gateway that's a large sign that will kind of welcome people to what we're calling City Hall backyard. That's number 1 on the plan there. And then I'm just going to kind of touch on the major features, which is as you arrive into this space, to your left is the community garden. We're going to have a welcome garden with a sign kind of designating that space and inviting people into the garden if they have access to it. There's also a ADA accessible picnic table at that location at 2 so that people can sit and have a picnic. If you've maybe gathered stuff from the community garden and you want to sit and have a meal there, you can do that. And then as you kind of move on to 3 and 4, that's a space where we're going to have community garden beds that are open to the public since the garden is currently fenced. These are just small herb beds where people can come and gather basil and things like that, various herbs. And then at 5, there's a playground space that I'll talk a little bit more about later. 6 is an open lawn for picnicking, maybe playing lawn games, having small events, maybe having movie night in the park. 7 is another nature space area, nature play area with materials that will be actually provided by the city of Sunset Valley for things like fort building, doing like kind of tree stumps that kids can play on and step on. 8 is a shade structure with a picnic table so that people can come and have picnics there. And number 9 is a fire pit that can be used and rented by the community. It has a locking enclosure that can be rented, so you can remove the enclosure and have a gathering there. It's also would be a good place to have the winter solstice event with the city. Number 13 is a labyrinth with an art piece in the middle. We're thinking it could be a telescope or something like that to kind of keep the kind of spiritual atmosphere of the labyrinth as part of that. And then on the other side, connecting to the trail on the other side, number 10 is a small community orchard where we can have native fruit trees like Texas persimmon and Mexican plum, and potentially other fruit-bearing trees that people can kind of come take fruit from. And then as you move out and connect to the surrounding trails that are a little bit more southwest of the site here, we have art opportunities that could also be pollinator houses as well. And then that will also have you enter into more of a restored prairie type landscape, and that will be done kind of in tandem with some of the restoration projects and planning work that we're also doing with the city right now. And you can just kind of skip this slide here. So talking a little bit about the materials here, we're using decomposed granite paths throughout the whole space. That's kind of typical of what we've been using in Sunset Valley projects and what you see throughout the city. And that's permeable, so it does not add to any impervious surfaces as part of this project. And then the playgrounds will be permeable playground mulch, so kind of keeping a really natural feel and aesthetic to this space. And then you'll see into the community garden, there is a new decomposed granite path being added so that those in wheelchairs can get into the garden and use the ADA accessible vegetable beds that are already there, and then exit out the other side as well. And then we can go to the next one. Here are just some images of what that could look like, the decomposed granite path, playground mulch. We do have some permeable pavers that are in the picnic area to kind of designate that space. And then as kind of a little bit of an accent, adding some limestone flagstone pavers in the decomposed granite as kind of the entries and exit spaces of our kind of major areas. And then, oh, did you have a question there?
Yeah, can you go back to the, while we're touching on the trails, one more slide? So is, just the intention in terms of because I walk that trail a lot, the one that connects to the Southwest Trail Connection System, is that converting that existing trail or the existing, pathway to the crushed ground granite gravel? That hill where it goes above the retention dam always gets like muddy, soggy, things like that. Is that kind of what the pavers are also going to be helping with, or is that going to be addressed at all?
It's really kind of more of like a transition
Yeah.
between the DG and where it's going to just start to become a mown path, so it just doesn't end.
Okay.
It's just kind of adding some of the flagstone to kind of basically be a bridge between the mown area and the DG. So it's more aesthetic,
Okay.
as like we just don't want the DG to end and then it's mown. Just something to soften that.
Okay. Thanks.
But thank you for noting that, and we're thinking the DG will end prior to it becoming that kind of muddy area, so that it'll just be mown, and then we're not going to have a lot of the DG being washed away, and for that to be a problem. And then just going into the furnishing plan a little bit, this just shows where we're going to have some seating. Seating will be along the playground area. We're going to have an ADA accessible picnic table outside of the community garden, and then picnic tables underneath the shade structure just to the right of that fire pit. Art opportunities, again, will be more integrated into the prairie landscape. and then pollinator houses as well. We're suggesting some purple martin houses, and we'll have some pictures of that later, but that could be also something else if there's something else interesting to people there. We're also proposing a shade sail that will go above the playground structures. We initially had a couple of these. They're more expensive than you might think, so we're kind of narrowing it down to one over the major feature, and then really trying to plant bigger trees to quickly shade out some of the other features later. And then outside of the community garden, on the kind of west side of the community garden, having benches with planter beds that could have herbs planted kind of in the back of the bench. And then other kind of basic amenities that we're including are we're moving the water fountain just a little bit closer in. Currently, it's a little bit closer to the street, so it's closer to the community garden and closer to the playground area. And then we're also providing bike racks by that cistern right at the entry. And then a new fence for the community garden is something that was requested, and that's kind of it for that slide. Here are some images of what we had in mind for those features. I'm not going to touch too much on these. I think they were in the council packet, and they'll be available, if anyone wants to see more of these. What we're calling the Play and Move plan is all about our play structures, and we also heard feedback from the community that they wanted to see more exercise equipment for adults. So we integrated an area across from the nature play area that has a sit-up bench, pull-up bars, and push-up bars, and that will be available for people to use, and that has some trees to help shade that location. And then in terms of play, we have the two play areas, the nature play area and the kind of more equipment-focused play area. And if you go to the next page, we have some images of what that equipment will look like. This is all sourced from a company called Compan, and they have someone here, actually very local, who we've been working with on this, and they will actually be able to help with the installation as part of this project, which will be really great. And something that we really like about this company and their equipment is that a lot of it is wood, and we've selected wood materials for these play structures to kind of keep a natural feel and to be aligned with the idea of kind of sustainability and not creating more plastic that we're putting into the environment. So you'll see most of the play structures here are made of wood, rope, a little bit of metal. And then, so we have what's called a little hen house for ages 2 to 5, and then we have some climbing features for bigger kids, including this tree climber, a little parkour course, a crawling pyramid, and stilts. And then here's a picture of the exercise equipment that's also provided by Compan. That playground equipment provider uses the same material and the same style as the playground features. And you can actually select and mix and match the features that you want. And so this doesn't quite show exactly what we've picked out, but we have three. So we have three: a pull-up, a push-up, and I think I forgot the last one. Sit-up, thank you. And then the nature play will be kind of put together by the city of Sunset Valley, including small kind of loose pieces for fort building, and you can kind of create these stepping areas with tree stumps that are called tree cookies. And then the planting plan is really focused on native Texas species. We have our restored prairie as the trail system, kind of as the gathering space kind of connects to the trail system. We have the labyrinth, which will be a mix of pollinator kind of focused plantings and native grasses. The open lawn will be maintained as a typical lawn for events and things like that, so people kind of have a place to kick around a soccer ball or sit down and have a picnic, have an event. The orchard will have a mix of fruiting trees and some native Texas fruiting trees. The community garden beds that are outside of the community garden, again, will focus on really easy to grow, low maintenance herbs so that community members can come and take things for, you know, whatever they're cooking that night or just kind of to taste and touch and smell things. And then there will be landscaped areas such as the welcome garden to kind of bring people into the space closer to the entryway. Here are some images of what those things could look like: the labyrinth, the lawn, landscape beds, and the welcome garden, the restored prairie. And then in total, we've kind of costed this out and worked with Carolyn on what they would actually be able to build in-house. And we came to the total of about $537K, a mix of that coming from different sources. So venue tax items, all the planting is about $100K. Art from the hot funds, about $50K, but again, it's hard to say what exactly that is because we're not exactly sure what that art would look like at this point. So we didn't include that in the total because that will be based on kind of moving forward conversations on what that art would look like. And so in total, the general fund cost would be about $431K. And then we also discussed annual maintenance costs and what would it be to add this on to the maintenance load for staff and contractors. And we estimated about $6,500 per year, and that's going to be confirmed with Texascapes once the plans are more set and put in place at this point. And that's it. So I welcome any questions, discussion, and kind of look forward to hearing how you'd like to move forward.
Thank you, and thank you for the work with the community to get the feedback in terms of shaping this. Certainly, I think we're long overdue for a playground area that we can call our own, other than the one that's down the street in terms of Reese, which is not necessarily accessible for everybody, and this area behind here is a prime location for that potential. Some things I wanted to follow up on, and then before handing it over to council. What will happen with the existing trees that are back there? There's certainly, I think, if you can go back to the main overview one. Keep going up one. Yeah, kind of I'm thinking like, I don't know if these trees are even worth saving. There's several that are next to where we would put the playground itself, and some of them are growing and getting large, but I was kind of curious, like, are those incorporated into the plan?
The location of those trees is kind of where the playground is, so we would probably relocate the trees.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if they're worth saving or not, just because.
Some of them are kind of cool and interesting trees that we don't have a lot of around here. So similar to what we did when some of the facilities was built, we actually relocated several trees that were kind of unique that we don't have a lot of around here, and so we did an air spade process and kind of excavated them and moved them and replanted them somewhere else. So we would probably incorporate them in other places in this design, basically.
Okay.
And thankfully, they are pretty small, so it wouldn't be too much of a big effort to dig them up and relocate them so they can provide shade and can grow in other locations.
Another question I had was, regarding maintenance, that's always something that we want to get a good handle on or be better prepared for. That's $6,500. I know that's just contingent on what Texascapes says they'll do. Some of the choice, for example, to have a labyrinth that's made of grass and shrubs versus having a labyrinth that's permanent, with stone or something like that. Is that something that you guys looked at or got feedback on? Because I could see that helping with some of the maintenance costs, just to, those kind of areas might be, something we want less maintenance on, but still retains the characteristics of what we're looking for. And that was a thought that came to mind when you're going through some of these, just in terms of the maintenance of the vegetation there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's certainly a lot of the labyrinths are made of stone. I think we talked about it and kind of just went in the direction of the grasses. We just like those precedents a little bit more, but I think that's something that we could consider and talk about.
Yeah, if you go to the slide with the pictures of the labyrinths,
Yeah.
I think one more up. Yeah, those look very nice. My only concern is that over time, keeping up with the maintenance of that
Yeah.
specialized shape and that sort of things might be a little harder for us to do. But, you know, I think it's looking for more feedback from council and things like that, but yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I've seen some labyrinth ideas where people will come and build it together and like bring a stone from their own backyard or something like that. So it could be a community project as well.
Yeah, and you could even incorporate some like colorful mosaic type designs that way, you know, if you're, you know, painting the stones or things like that, it might be kind of interesting as well, so.
Okay.
Impervious cover. What is this, I know we're using a lot of pervious materials. Is there impervious cover impact to any of the structures that we're talking about building or that are in the design?
I can answer some of that.
Sure.
So I think we will have to consider, for the most part, I mean, generally throughout the green spaces, conservation areas, I mean, we'll be talking about that at Upper Creek. There's an exemption for some trails in some areas. I think we probably want to see about having that apply to this as well. However, there are areas, there's one area in particular around the gathering space and the fire pit that we may look at that. It would still be granite gravel, it's still going to be that same material, but it is outside of the scope. I think we have like a 10 or 11 foot like width, and that's obviously wider than 11 feet there to make room for a fire pit. So we may have a little bit of impervious cover that we may have to consider there, even though it is going to be built out of fairly permeable materials.
Okay, but they, like, for example, like the shade structure over the playground, would that be considered impervious cover?
I think we're looking at, so there are different types of shade structure you can look at. Some allow water to come through, some obviously do not. And I think we were looking at some of the shade sails that would hopefully allow some kind of water to come through them. I don't think we counted it when the school did some. I think that was over their playground. We didn't count it when we looked at what they were looking at, and it allowed some infiltration through it over time, and so we didn't count those against the school.
Okay. Another question I had is, this is going to, if we do this, it's going to kind of expand this into a pretty large area, which is, you know, useful for multiple purposes. I was kind of looking at this and thinking a single water fountain is sort of not the ideal, you know, to have like, you know, not have more locations, but I don't believe we have any water lines that could connect, like putting a water fountain towards, you know, the southwest end, for example. Like, I'm not sure if we have the actual water connections to do that.
So there's water in that area.
Okay.
So if we want to, because we already have the existing water fountain right here. So if we wanted, I think part of those conditions we have is to extend the water line. So if we wanted to extend the water line a little bit further to put in another water fountain, we can do that.
Yeah, my only thought is that I think relocating it is great because we want it next to the playground, but if people are going to be utilizing, for example, the fire pit or walking over to the labyrinth, just having like another possible convenience spot, you know, just to the north of that 9, you know, next to the fire pit, you know, it just helps people stay hydrated when it's 110 degrees.
And they're on a fire pit.
Yeah, but that would be the only other feedback I had, just regards to evaluating that as well. But personally, this is very exciting. You know, I understand that there's a lot of cost considerations that we have to go forward here. Very interested in hearing, you know, how we can, as a city, contribute, you know, staff to this project. But I certainly, just as a parent, as a community member, it's something that I would really appreciate if we had this as a welcoming gateway to our city. So with that, I'll hand it over to council for questions and feedback. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It's I think it's a very well thought out plan. One thing I've not heard discussed yet, I'd like to talk about parking. And just in general, I'd like to hear what considerations have been made relative to parking for this. And I worry that we may be victims of our success, and that if this becomes a popular area, particularly, you know, perhaps during working hours, that the parking along here could be saturated. I worry about, you know, staff being displaced in terms of doing their daily jobs. So could you talk about that, please?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And it's not quite something that we've considered yet, and I'm not as familiar with how busy it does get during the day here, I mean, what's the vacancy level of the parking spaces during the workday? Do you think it would be accommodating of people who are coming to bring their kids here? If anyone knows that?
During the day, it's fairly vacant unless we're having some sort of event. I will say there are some days, especially on nice weather days, where I leave work and the parking lot is full of people utilizing the trail. Caroline and I were just discussing, I mean, we've always kind of used AISD, like for overflow, for our events. That's something we could, we do have a good relationship with the Burger Center. I don't know, maybe we could show them this plan and say, hey, can we utilize your parking lots across the street as overflow? And we do have the crosswalk there, so we can reach out to AISD. But we do have a good number of parking spaces here. But yes, this could become if it becomes popular, these spaces could be taken up. But I would suggest working with AISD to confirming overflow parking across the
I guess
street.
to some degree it's self-moderating, because it's like all of us have done. If we pull in here, if it's full, we go across the street.
Right, yeah.
But my concern, I guess, is with if it's what's the possibility that it would disrupt the daily functions that happen on these facilities on this property. Maybe it's not at all. I'm just would like to hear that considered before we approve a project.
Do we fully utilize the public works parking spaces that are?
Yes.
Okay, those are all.
Those, Public Works parks
Okay.
there usually. But I wouldn't think that we would be overrun with the parking during the workday kind of thing. I think, maybe on the weekends is when, in the evenings is when it becomes most busy, I guess you could say. And generally at that point, city business is done, except for council meetings, obviously.
Mayor Pro Tem?
To echo what Councilmember Burrell said about being victims of our own success, I mean, I think it's a great idea to build a playground back here. I think it's wonderful. I think it will attract families. I'm thinking of the Easter egg hunt that Public Safety and the rest of the staff put on, which was, we had an enormous turnout for that. So I'm wondering, because I think this would be very popular, have we thought about bathroom facilities for this area?
I think the assumption that we're working with is people would use the facilities here. Is that right, Carolyn?
I mean, during the workday, yeah.
Yeah, when they're
the
open.
building would be available for people to come in. Now, on the weekends, there are no bathrooms. Yeah.
Right.
And that's something, I think people take into consideration, like when they go to different places, that there will be no bathrooms here.
I think some other areas we've been looking at compostable toilets.
Well,
That's something that, I'm not sure if it would be a consideration that we could look at here, but.
We discussed that just last week in planning and environmental, because we were talking about a little bit with the uplands and stuff, because the infrastructure does not exist over
Right.
there. And that would be very expensive to build all that infrastructure. So it is something that could be considered. We haven't really looked into it as much as very much before, so.
I mean, it's something we could think about later if it turns out to be really
Could be
popular.
that could be a phase
Right.
2 coming in the future.
But I tend to think if we build that playground, it will be very popular, at
Yes.
least on weekends.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I kind of wish this was here when my kids were all like really small, but now they're all growing up, so I guess they're still pretty small. Do we, how needed is the new fence around the community garden?
I know, that is something we get asked about quite frequently from the community garden folks, because the new fence is, the existing fence, there's several posts that are not in good shape anymore. We've been kind of batting it around for at least a year and a half, 2 years maybe, that they need a new fence. And they also get a lot of rabbits and stuff like that, because the fence isn't built, isn't built for
Okay.
protecting the community garden the way it should be. So I do know that the fence is something that's very important to the community garden people.
The, the prices are always high, so it's like, it's kind of like a little shocking. But it is totally a thing that we can just do kind of like in a phased approach, just kind of map it out and then over the course of years, maybe do one thing at a time. Was that your kind of thought that it was like, just do it all, or?
So the way we're looking at this is that there are portions that would be built in-house, and there are portions that we would also contract out. For example, the construction of the playground itself, that is something that would be contracted out to be built. The things such as the paths, laying out some of the landscaped areas, the gathering space, all of that, we would probably be building a lot of that in-house with Public Works. Any of the little planting beds, things like that, that we have the ability to build ourselves, we'll be doing water lines, we can do all of that. We would also be looking at this as community opportunities. We mentioned the Labyrinth as a community opportunity. We mentioned, I would say also like the Welcome Garden. Basically bringing back, we used to do Trails and Trees Day in Sunset Valley, and so it'd be some Trails and Trees Day opportunities where we would go through and kind of lay out everything for like the Welcome Garden. And then the community comes in and helps with the planting and just sometimes even just connecting into the irrigation. And so there will be phases. We would probably do it over the next year, the whole thing, but it's going to still be like phased within that with these different portions of it.
Okay.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Is the community working on aspect already reflected in that price though?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay.
And so we may have some price that we can look at once we get into it regarding some of the hardscape and stuff like that. We'd have to look at the pricing on that. We're working on some of those numbers now, so for another location, so we may be able to bring some of those costs down. But if you look at the pricing, like on there,
in some ways, it's like it's a lot of things.
It's a lot of things. So
yeah.
and so if you look at what you have, like the playground equipment is that's going to probably be that total is the cost of the equipment itself. There's going to be that contingency will probably go toward installing the playground. So if you think of the playground as being about $175,000 to build and install, and that includes the exercise equipment as well. And then site furnishings are, benches and things like that about $100,000. So it kind of there's a lot of things in there, but I think overall the price is pretty good for building an entire park, basically.
Okay, yeah. I guess I wasn't thinking about it as like a new park. It's going to be decomposed granite 10 feet wide?
No, I think it's narrower, right?
In some areas, it's narrower. I think there's a main path that is 10 feet with the 2 concrete areas on either side, and then some of the other pieces are narrower as you go at kind of the interior paths.
Public Works uses that to get back into the trails a lot,
Yes.
so it'll still be wide enough for you guys to.
Yeah, 10 feet. Yeah, no, which is about what's out there now. Yeah, we would still we would be fine with that.
Yeah, and I guess like going back to the new park thing, the other big playground in Sunset Valley is also called Backyard, so maybe we should not call it Backyard.
That's right.
But it was a good name.
It's a great name.
That was it.
Thank you.
Get back to the overview slide again. Some of you said maybe think about something else. So, because right now we have a lot of mode paths, that are sort of evolved over the last couple of years. It seemed like that, we're mowing new areas. Those are being used by some of the Public Works vehicles. So I'm trying to remember, so this shows like a new spur coming down where it says like art opportunity, that purple dot, the art opportunity in that mown path area. Is that utilizing some of the existing mown paths, or is that, because there's that wall, or the retention hill, right? I'm trying to envision where these paths are going to connect to the surrounding trails. There's the main path, which goes on the west side of the retention wall, which I guess is the one that says connecting to surrounding trails on the west side. Not that one, but the furthest one west. So that's the one that is on the far side of that the hill, essentially, right there. Then there's the path on the hill right now. So that's sort of being replaced by these new paths. Is that kind of what we're
Yeah,
considering?
I think that will probably, for example, the one that's on the hill causes erosion and
Yeah.
is not a good location for the path, really.
Yeah.
So some of these are going to,
Move it off the hill.
those
so
paths will
okay.
be moved away and we'll move to a more sustainable trail location.
Yeah. No, that's good because I don't want to reinforce people using that path and, like you said, it causes erosion.
Yes.
It also, kills the vegetation up there, things like that.
And its primary function is to be a berm for the water, the ponds back there.
Right.
So
Okay. And with these two connecting paths coming, not the main one, but these two, they would connect to where the pet station is, that the sort of intersection of
Yes.
that area. Is that
yeah,
kind of the
they
concept?
should go down in that area.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Councilor Rosengarten?
Yes, I appreciate that MEND worked with a lot of wood to give the natural feel. However, wood means a lot of maintenance because the play area right now looks bad over there, what we have already, just for the kids to play around with. They're all wood items. They need restaining, they need a new coating and so on. Same thing that's going to happen with this. Even though it says a 10-year warranty, that's 10 years. The park playscape area that we have for the city next to Doc's backyard is more sustainable, lasts longer, less maintenance. And I think it was, 15 years before we had to go in and we had to repair some items on the playscape and so on. But it lasts longer. And so would we as a city consider doing more sustainable, even though it's not wood products, because you're going to get your return on investment much better with something other than wood.
I think with the company that we're working with, they have the wood, and I think they treat it in such a way that I think it's pressure treated so that it is not prone to rotting or needing to be replaced soon. So I think that they do provide a little bit of work on the wood to allow it to not need to be replaced as quickly.
So then concerned parents might say, what is that chemical?
That's a good point. I think that we'll have to talk to them a little bit more about what that process is and what exactly that looks like and what alternatives might exist if that's a concern.
Thank you.
Other questions from council before I open up for public comments? All right.
Okay.
If we can at least see at least one person who wants to speak, and we'll see if other people want to as well.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I really liked the presentation, and I appreciate all the work that went into it. And now we move into my one little place, which is the Labyrinth. And I'm happy to be part of a subcommittee on this. I really appreciate the mayor's comments about that. They certainly echoed some of my thoughts. And I like art. We all know I like art. But I don't believe a telescope in the center of a labyrinth. So now we're moving into the woo phase of Melissa commentary. But feng shui is like a thing I do. And sacred spaces are like a thing I spend a lot of time doing. So you kind of have, so if you're like a feng shui person and there's a place called the center point in your house that you can actually feel. And if you've done labyrinths a lot, that center space in the labyrinth is also a place that you can actually feel. I mean, there are times that it feels like the wind is going through you when you really get into these places. And so the physical space that you're creating in this way that you do that really has a presence. So if you're not used to a thing like that and you put a thing there, like a telescope, you've kind of lost the thing you're trying to create. And so that's my concern about that. I really like the idea of it being a community project. And I could see like putting a tile mosaic or something if you wanted an art element where it's flat and it doesn't impact the energy of the space. But if you're creating a sacred space, you kind of need to hang out with those people who are used to hanging out in sacred places. You can't just say, oh, this is a cool idea, we're going to plop it here. If you want to make it a sacred space, you need people who sort of specialize in that, just like any other piece of art. And I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I'm saying I've been in a few. And I'll tell you that those are important components. And so I like it. I'm excited about it. I'm happy to work on it. But I will tell you that those are my red flags that I hear going out when you think about it as telesmoke. I don't know. I mean, if you think about like a church space, right? And then you take the most sacred space in your church and then you put something that doesn't really necessarily relate to it, that's a concern to me. But that's a small thing, you know. And I do think that the maintenance is nice. And I really like a lot of people who make labyrinths, they take little prayers and they put them in the stones that make the thing, you know. And I'm not saying we have to get particularly woo about this. It'll still be the same thing. But I like the idea of it being a community space. I love the community mural we make. I love that this is a community-centered place. And any time we can take all the energy of the people who live here, and especially, I have to say, I'm mourning a little bit of this community, not to say I don't love the new people who have come in, but so many of the old people are going now. I mean, we're just old, you know, and some of them are moving away, and so there's a little piece of them that we can capture in our labyrinth. I think that would be a really cool thing, you know. So I don't know that we have to have a name there or anything, although there are people who definitely put bricks in their labyrinths with people's names on them, you know, little pieces of your community, and you smile whenever you see that person's name or something. I don't know what we do, but I think that there's a really strong opportunity here that we should take advantage of, and I just want this to be an actual sort of art piece and labyrinth piece that makes it be a labyrinth. Thank you.
Thank you. It does remind me, like, if you go to the, next to the Doherty Art Center, they have the hill there. It's always kind of these kind of fun things. You get to this, like a spot or the center of a spot, and there's some secret discovery you make there. They have, I think up there, they have musicians, like Texas musicians, and sort of, you know, landmark.
What's up there?
Sorry. It's been there 10 years. You should. But, you know, the sort of idea that you can't see it until you get to the center or something, and then you discover is kind of a fun thing to play around with, too. So I think that's worth considering for the design of this. So, Councilmember Johnson.
Wait, what's a pollinator house? Is that just a? The purple dots are marked as pollinator houses. You might. Matt's going to tell you to go up to the microphone, or I will tell you to ask you to.
Right there. So if you look at bottom left, art and pollinator habitat, that's an example of something that we could do. So that's purple martin houses. I know, for example, another community, Wells Branch. Wells Branch is a community that we've worked with in the past. They have a lot of these in kind of a restored prairie area, and they attract these bird species called purple martins, and they're really kind of beautiful sculptural installations. They look like almost like gourds, and they attract these species, and it's kind of interesting. But that's flexible. I mean, they could be bee boxes. They could, you know, provide habitat for all sorts of creatures. It could be something different. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just when I hear pollinator, I just automatically think bees and like bee.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of maintenance because like they just die, like colonies just die a lot, and so if we're not gonna have just empty boxes, like that's gonna be like public works, just like they just have a bee person. But
Yeah.
no, I really dig on the purple martin houses though. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Mayor?
I was going to say, if you've never seen one of those tree climbing structures, they have one, again, at Doherty Arts, and kids just go crazy for that. It's like going back to that one slide, it's a real fun, I think it's that one, yeah. It's just incredible, like, how kids just use that to, like, you know, bravely, you know, especially in the case of that one, it's like 20, 25 feet tall, you know, just climb to the top. But I thought that was like a neat pull, you know, in terms of the type of structure we could have back there that's, you know, innovative, but also very, very fun, you know, for kids. Councilmember Ronikis.
So I really like this idea too, and I love the labyrinth. I've walked a lot of them, and theoretically, what I've been told is you walk into the labyrinth with a question. And you get to the center, and the answer comes to you, and you walk out of the labyrinth considering the answer that you got. So for the center of the labyrinth, one of the things, if we put anything there, I think just like a bench, maybe that has breathe engraved on it or something more that's meditative and contemplative than a telescope. And the bench could be something like our limestone that doesn't really need maintenance, just real simple.
Yeah, I like those ideas, and thank you again for the feedback. And I like the idea of like a subcommittee or a group of community members that are passionate about these spaces to kind of help advise on this. And I think because we'll be working so closely with the city to build the trails and things like that, it'll be easier to kind of coordinate rather than with a contractor who might be in the mix of doing things. So thank you for that feedback.
This is maybe a question for staff. You know, when we have events here, the proximity to this space is actually kind of nice because, you know, we have the fire pit outside, we have the art, you know, like the winter solstice, you know, we had like all the tables inside, we have the planetarium inside. And now we're talking about, you know, moving it or removing it some distance. I'm just kind of, you know, I'm thinking in terms of like if we have like a winter solstice, we wouldn't necessarily be able to like be as closely integrated with this building. Maybe that's a good thing though, you know, maybe because we don't want to use the parking lot for a fire pit. You know, it's not ideal. But what do you, just in terms of like your thoughts, like if we do winter solstice, would we just move everything to this backyard area, or would we want to still have, you know, this city hall for some of that?
I think we could, I mean, I think we would use both spaces still. I think similarly, if we brought like the planetarium back, we'd have it in here. And we've done like the star parties before where we definitely have activities here, and then we send people all the way out there to go and, you know, look through telescopes and things like that. I think one of the things I think we would do would be, we would actually put in I think it may be in there, a crosswalk that links obviously here to there, so it's kind of obvious that there's a pathway to get across. I think we had talked about something like that, so I think that's something that we would have to consider.
Yeah, we had it in there, and then we realized that it was actually, we would have to figure out how it would connect the crosswalk because it was connecting to the ADA space. So we can figure that out. But I think, yeah, having a reflective crosswalk that might be a little brighter would be great.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about this is it gives some flexibility about where we hold events. Like if it's nice weather, then we have an option of moving things more to this lawn, or like if we're doing another music art, you know, performance, maybe it's better suited here. But if it becomes, you know, too hot or rainy, then we have the option of, you know, going back here.
And I think one of the things we may also consider, we already have electricity out there. We may also consider putting in some kind of pop-up hidden electrical outlets so we can maybe run some stuff out there as well. So that's something we may have to consider and talk to an electrician about to see what we can do with that.
Councilmember Medigas?
So I could really see, like we did the Art of Fire, and we had the fire performers. I think that would be in that, was that number 6, or that community space there?
Yeah, probably 9.
Would be a great place for that. And then sometimes we've had food trucks, so the food trucks would be on the curb there, and that would kind of make that connection into that space, if the weather permitted. So I could see a lot of uses for that for events.
Councilor Rosengarten?
Carolyn, I love the way you said number 9 instead of number 6. No grass.
We'd put them on the hardscape.
Oh, yeah. Fire pit for the fire.
Exactly.
Observation also.
Yeah.
At lawn area where we could host some movie nights would be really, really fun. So.
Yeah, and I think also just that, you know, I think going back to when we were first conceiving this, there was some discussion of like having a soccer play area, and getting a lot of feedback saying that not really appropriate in a big scale.
Pickleball was the original idea.
Right, pickleball too.
Not go very
But
far.
having like just a a sculpted area that's big enough, that's nice, for having, kids kick a ball
Yeah.
or having some sort of impromptu.
Something more
games.
casual than like
Yeah.
a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It lends itself to a lot of different opportunities.
Yeah.
Council, any other thoughts or feedback? Councilor Johnson?
It's kind of related to this. It was something that Chief Carter and I were talking about before. There is a Sunset Valley Girl Scout troop, and I always thought it would be cool if they currently go down to Camp Tex Lake, but if they had like another camping opportunity, but I'm like, we like literally like tell people they can't camp in Sunset Valley, but can we? Is there like a special use permit?
Something real quick. Hold on. I think.
I've thought about asking this for like a year, and here I am. Before I daydream about this, let's get the bad, because, that lawn area
Yeah.
would be great just for any.
Tents and,
Yeah, and then you got the fire pit right there, and then go to bed into the tents.
While Carolyn's looking that up, another thought that occurred to me is if you go to the Lady Bird Johnson Wildfire Center, they have the Fortlandia exhibits and they have those nice trails. One thing I always really got a kick out of, and the kids got a kick out of, are those huge swings that hang down from these large trees, right? Where you can, sort of use the swings to, do a whole bunch of different kind of fun, light acrobatic type things. I've always had this vision of like where the trail goes through the copse of trees to the southeast, where it actually enters that. There's a section there next to where we have the bird houses, or the bird feeders, where we have some beautifully large trees with overhanging branches. And I always love the idea of maybe one day we have like some of those big swings, in that area. It's kind of off the site here, but maybe it kind of fits in with the idea of making this space a little bit more kind of fun and accessible in different ways.
yeah.
So,
I like that idea. I was just there this weekend. I saw those.
yeah. All right, sorry.
So the way the ordinance reads is camp or stay overnight anywhere except in an area specifically designated for overnight camping. So I think if the city, I think that needs some refinement, obviously, but the city could make like a permit for that area back there as that spot based on a permit basis.
We'll recognize members of the public who wish to speak again.
Mayor, I just wanted to say I love your idea, and we used to have it in the park at Reese, and the problem is the trajectory for the playground rules. You have to make the trajectory for that long thing to be safe. And while I would love that if we can pull it off, that's why we got rid of it in the Reese Park. And so, it would be wonderful to pull it off, but you have to, if they can jump off of it, you have to make it safe.
Yeah, I think that would obviously be a prime consideration, is just making it safe if we could do that. But I just always loved it when we visit the Wildflower Center. It's just this kind of fun thing that everybody can do. So, yeah. All right, with no further questions, really appreciate Men's putting this information together and staff's work on this as well. I think I've gotten the feedback that I need to work with staff on the next steps for this, or potential steps for this, and I appreciate everybody's feedback. So. All right, Council, with that, we're going to move on to our last agenda item, which is presentation, discussion, and possible action on recommendation from the Community and Economic Development Committee to explore the creation of a long-term strategic economic development plan for the city. And staff, do you want to take this, or Mayor Pro Tem, do you want to introduce this item? Okay.
I can give a brief introduction. So this is an effort spearheaded by one member of the CED Committee, Community and Economic Development, Horacio Zambrana. And he began discussing this with the committee, and then worked with the chair, Penny Seidel, myself, and Mayor Pro Tem Young, who's the CED liaison. Really, his goal is for the city to have a long-term strategic economic development plan, and his idea is to approach an institution like UT, he suggested, the architecture school, which urban planning is a part of that school, to see what help they could give in assisting, whether that's like, it's a student project or a student and faculty project. And so in discussions with myself and Mayor Pro Tem, we kind of helped him craft this proposal that was provided to you in the backup, and then CED met on May 1st, and they unanimously recommended sending this proposal to council. I will say that this is very exploratory. We're in a very exploratory phase. We obviously know there's no budget. I think the idea is to keep this at no or very minimal cost, not trying to hire consultants or anything of that nature. We have some residents, I think, that could contribute to this, and if it turns into something like an ad hoc committee or it's a subgroup of the CED committee. Again, this is just a very exploratory phase, but since this would be an economic development plan for the city, it was my recommendation and Mayor Pro Tem's that this needed to come to council to kind of get your blessing before we went off and started working on this and potentially approaching an institution such as UT. So anything you'd like to add, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. Like Matt said, we're looking for council's blessing to go forward with this. Horacio has already reached out to some folks at UT and the School of Architecture very tentatively. So they probably are willing to talk to us. I think that's a good starting point. We can see where that leads. And just do this kind of in a series of steps where first we do the exploration, see if we make contact with them and it's worth following through. Potentially then doing something like forming an ad hoc committee, and then deciding where we want to go for that. I think that I like when Horacio suggested this, I really like the idea because I think it's kind of like one more piece that we want to put in the puzzle of, we have a comprehensive plan, we have our parks and open space plan, we have a land development code plan, that we're going to get. All these things can be taken into consideration by someone like people at the School of Architecture and say, so they understand our vision, what their city is like, and then say, here's, decide whether or not they can do something where they start to craft a long-term economic development plan for us. So I think this is well worth exploring.
Councilor Johnson?
What is the School of Architecture at UT? What do they do?
One of the things they do is urban planning.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually think, I was speaking with Jerry about this earlier, I would actually approach maybe the economic department, which is, I believe, under the School of Liberal Arts. It's not in the McCombs Business School, or it's
He knows.
economics is in the McCombs, with McCombs. Okay, so it's with McCombs, or approaching the LBJ, which is, public affairs. Really, this is interdisciplinary, and I think the reason this would be potentially interesting is for like a capstone project or something like that is, here we have a city, very unique, that doesn't have the traditional tools of economic development that another city would have. We don't have property taxes, so we can't offer property tax abatement, and we don't really have land. So what can we do, right? That's for economic development. So it's kind of like, it would be an idea I see as for someone's capstone project to work on. But
Yeah.
again, this is very much exploratory, kind of getting your blessing to then go and approach whoever it might be. I think we would need to have some additional discussions with Horacio and whoever else on CED is interested, along with staff that have recommendations, and we have people on council that have UT experience. So yeah, several.
So if it's School of Architecture or any of the others, cast a wide net and see who is interested. Would this involve, like, whose staff time would this involve? Is this mostly Kyle or you?
Probably me. I would be the contact, just insofar as giving like, hey, here's all, it's like Mayor Pro Tem said, here's our comp plan, here's our vision, it's just giving them all of these resources, giving them the data, well, not really the data, but just giving them all the resources. Here's all of our plans, here's, something about the city. So it would probably mostly be contacting me, but I'm sure there would be, I don't know what this would look like, a subset of the CED committee.
I think that's where we'd start.
Yeah.
Just for this part of
Yeah.
it, where we make the contact with, you know, people at
Yeah.
this School of Architecture, whoever, and then see where we want to go with it.
Yeah, I think I'd definitely want to recommend, you know, staff only getting involved once it's matured to a point where there's real action that needs to be taken, whether it's handing over information or being a liaison to our legal, because we may have to develop an MOU, right, you know, for what is it that we're doing with this partnership, whatever, or if this evolves into something where we're paying for a service, right, you know, something like that. So I think the idea of keeping it very exploratory with our blessing to designate, you know, Mayor Pro Tem Horacio, other members of the CD committee to pursue this, and then bringing back something that could be acted on more
Yes,
directly.
we're not asking for any budget dollars.
Yeah, we would bring back any sort of, you know, whatever this exploratory phase, you know, again, if we're like, oh, we're going to approach, you know, we reached out to a few folks, we had one interested department, we would bring then that proposal back. And
Oh, sorry,
ahead,
Matt, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say, I meet with Councilmember Burrell, and he indicated, so the department you're still a part of, Professor Emeritus, yeah. And you were telling me, so when an outside organization wants to work with engineering students, it's $3,000? Right?
Yeah, it was $3,000. But I would think 3,000 to 5,000 would be a reasonable expectation.
That we get paid, right?
No, sorry, no.
$20 billion endowment, and they'll take the $3,000.
Is this for working with faculty or with students?
I'm sorry?
Is the fee for working with faculty or with students?
The fee is I think it covers administrative cost actually for staff that run those programs.
Oh, that's interesting because I supervised 3 students on their capstone projects this past semester. And there wasn't any kind of a fee like that, but that's the School of Information, so it may be very
Right.
different.
Yeah, yeah. And who knows what architecture
Right.
or business would do. My speculation is that both, I would not be surprised.
Yeah, we
that
probably
both
should
had
work on that
some
assumption.
change, yeah.
Councilmember Rosinger?
Just to explore the creation of a long-term strategic economic development plan, I would be for it if someone made a motion.
I will make a motion for a recommendation from the CED committee to explore the creation of a long-term strategic economic plan for the city.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second for that? Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? My one additional sort of recommendation would be not just limiting ourselves to UT. We have a lot of other universities in the area. We're, you know, very fortunate to have such a rich higher education landscape. St. Edward's, Southwestern, those schools also might have some, you know, initial, you know, outreach, and maybe they have lower fees.
Yeah.
Or Concordia also, because Tom Seidel, like.
That's right.
Oh, right.
But they obviously UT is the flagship for many reasons, but also because they have a lot of depth, you know, in terms of these schools, and we might be able to access that. So, all right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, thank you to Horacio and for Mayor Pro Tem for bringing this. I think these kind of initiatives are just great to see coming out of residents and committee members, and I appreciate you shepherding this to us. With that, council, we don't have any more agenda items, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, we are adjourned at 7:33 p.m.
So Don made a pie, if anybody wants some pecan pie.